Chapter 6. The House. 15th hour, 29th day, 1st month, year 807, post-Heavenfall. With Pen's phobia considered, Valeria's team elected to hire a stagecoach to their next destination instead of the Skytram. They passed through one of the main walls between the middle and lower tiers and entered into narrower streets with cobblestone roads. The majority of the buildings were 2 to 4 stories of various sizes and built in half-timber style. Barris Street was not far from the tier wall, and the house of interest was at the very end of the road. "Here we are," Valeria pointed as she stepped out of the stagecoach. From the reports, both students died near the front steps from a fall off the 3rd floor. They looked at the concrete stoop before turning upwards at a long double-doored window. A small balcony with wrought iron fencing protruded from it. "Seems like an attic or a loft window," Zarin assumed. "It'll certainly be a spot of interest." Valeria led them to the front door, which had a paper sign reading, "Do not trespass. Under official Ovyliax investigation." The Sentinel tried the handle, but it refused to budge, to no one's surprise. "Anyone able to get us in?" she asked. Ariya raised her arm in affirmation and pulled out a leather pouch containing a set of lock-picking tools and skeleton keys. "This might look suspicious," Pen mentioned as he glanced around the empty street for signs of people. "We could have gone to the closest watch house, district magistrate, or even the residence department. But this is much quicker, and I wanted to get out before dinner," Valeria said with a wink. "If someone raises concerns, I'll let them know it's Sentinel business. You need not worry, Pen." "I got it," Ariya remarked as she successfully swiveled the correct skeleton key. With a rattle and click of the lock, the door swung open to reveal a narrow hallway with open entryways along the wall to the right and a long staircase on the left. The dark floorboards creaked deeply with age as the party stepped inside and began their inspection. Inside were spaces meant to serve as a sitting room, dining room, and kitchen, and while each was vacant of any furnishings, its tall ceilings and wall panelling made the home appear more grandiose than expected. Despite its emptiness, the team remained thorough under Valeria's supervision until she was satisfied they had methodically combed each room. The group then pushed upstairs and repeated the same meticulous approach for each of the bedrooms and bathrooms. Each yielded nothing of note, until they reached the closet of the master bedroom and found a trapdoor in the ceiling. "There's a pull string, but it's a bit out of reach," Valeria pointed. "I can probably boost someone up," Zarin offered as he stood under the trapdoor. Pen shook his head at the suggestion. "I can get it." With an arm outstretched and aimed at the entryway, a ghostly, ethereal hand projected itself from his real one and flew upwards. Mimicking the motions of his real hand, the spectral one reached for the pull string and successfully tugged it downwards. As the door tilted, a connected ladder slid out from above, and the party stared into the dark opening above. "This reminds me of a play about a croaking ghost who lived in the attic," Ariya whispered. "Please don't bring that up now," Valeria said with a scowl, and proceeded up the steps, followed by Zarin, Ariya, and Pen. Once atop, they found themselves in an attic space under the roof, dimly illuminated by the long, arched window they saw from outside. Like the other rooms, this area was also vacant, save for cobwebs and their own footsteps disturbing the heavy layers of dust. While the warm weather made the rest of the house feel a tad stuffy, this one was warm to the point of being uncomfortable. Yet there was another inexplicable sensation that made the space feel more oppressive, to which no one voiced their concern until Pen spoke up. "I feel a very faint charge in the air. Arc was manipulated here, and recently. I'd estimate at least a couple of days ago." "Could you figure out the type?" Valeria asked. Pen nodded. "I can use a ritual to analyse the residual patterns left behind." Reaching within his messenger bag, he retrieved a small, hardcover book, a piece of chalk, a nail, and a hammer. The contents were laid on the floor before turning to a page depicting a pentagonal pattern with sharp geometric shapes layered inside. He inscribed the same symbol onto the floorboards with the chalk, while reading the written incantations out loud. Upon completing the ceremony, Penn grabbed the hammer and nail and shouted a final phrase in Draconic. Arcane energy flowed from the artificer's fingertips to the tools and faintly pulsed with turquoise light. He hammered the nail into one of the lines of the chalk, and the glow cascaded from the impact to the rest of the pattern. Upon filling the edges of the insignia, the light suddenly concentrated on the nail and launched a bright beam connecting with Penn's left eye. When he looked up, one of his pupils glowed in the same hue of green. "Let's see what we have here," Penn said as he stood up and looked around. Immediately, his head locked to an area near the trapdoor, and he pointed. An enchantment was cast around here, something targeting the mind. "Can you tell what spell it was, Penn?" Valeria asked. "No, only the type, unfortunately." Through his eyes, the artificer was able to see very faint echoes of arc, as if trying to peer into specks of dust in direct sunlight. How the traces moved, as well as the hint of colour it emitted, gave him clues toward its identification. Penn followed the pattern of the residuals to the window and then squinted. How odd. A loud thunderclap suddenly came from below. "What in Tartarus's hellfires was that?" Zarin swore. "I don't know, but let's take a look. Zarin, you come with me. Ariya, stay up here and help Penn any way you can," Valeria ordered, descending the ladder. When they reached the first floor, they saw blasted glass from the sitting room's windows scattered all over. Through the broken opening, they could see a couple of houses nearby had suffered similar damage, and some neighbours stepped out to inspect the chaos. "Hello, are you all right?" Valeria greeted as they exited the property. "Yeah, just a couple of nicks here and there while I was sitting down and having tea," spoke a burly Dracokin man who was clearly underdressed. "Did you see what caused this?" "I was hoping you did. We were up there." She pointed back to the house they were investigating. "You two, inspectors?" "Sort of." "I thought we were hit by an earthquake," shouted a middle-aged human woman who had joined them from across the street. "Some troublemaker messing with Ark is more likely," the Dracokin snorted with a grimace of sharp teeth. "I'll send a message to the wardens," the woman assertedly said before returning into her home. "Ark?" Valeria scowled. "But why?" A blood-curdling scream echoed from above. By the time the Sentinel had turned to the direction of its source, she saw a blur of a large object slamming into the front stoop of the house they searched. Valeria's eyes immediately widened when she realised the object was actually one of her mentees, splayed out in a bloody heap. "Penn!" Zarin screamed in horror and rushed over to the scene. He tried to feel for a pulse, but Valeria knew from the state of his body he was dead on impact. Even with Aegis, a fall from that height would have been more than enough to shatter it through to the bones and organs. "Get the authorities!" she cried to the Dracokin before hauling Zarin up to his feet. "You need to get up there and find Ariya." The shaken candidate nodded and sprinted back into the house. His feet raced up the stairs, tripping on a couple of steps in his haste as he dreaded what he would find of his comrade. Inside the attic, he saw his companion curled against the wall, weeping into her arms near the open window. "Ariya, you're all right. I got you," he said gently, and softly placed a hand on her shoulder. I don't know what happened," she sobbed. "Penn opened the window to see what was going on outside. He stepped onto the balcony and what? He fell through it." Zarin stared at the window, trying to spot anything out of the ordinary before returning his attention to Ariya. "I'm going to take a closer look at it." Ariya snatched his forearm. No! "I'll be careful. I'm not going to step onto that balcony. You can hold on to me to make sure nothing happens. Ariya nodded with more effort to hold back tears and gradually stood up with her colleague's assistance. Together, they cautiously walked to the window, and Zarin could feel Ariya increasingly tighten the grip on his arm with each step. When he was within touching distance, he studied the windowsill and the glass panes for anything out of the ordinary. He traced the frame, searching for any bits of arcane writing, and even ran his fingers to be sure it was safe. Zarin then looked at the balcony. You said he fell through? Yes, Ariya replied in a whisper. Zarin slowly crouched down and pulled out the dwarven rifle slung on his shoulder. Holding it steadily in one arm, he used the tip of its barrel to poke the balcony floor. The gun passed through it as easily as it would through the air. It's an illusion, Zarin snarled. That would explain how Pen... A pause of silence between them flooded the room as their minds repeated the perspectives of the loss of their companion. I'm sorry, Ariya whispered with guilty emotions welling up again. I'm not as well versed in spellcraft. If I had been a better student at it, I could have spotted the spell and saved him. Don't blame yourself. Someone deliberately cast this illusion, and I suspect it has something to do with the incident outside. Where is Sentinel Valeria? Zarin listened for the possibility of footsteps coming up the access ladder, but heard nothing. I thought she was coming back up here, but she must still be in the streets. Come on, let's go meet her. The two of them went back to the bedroom floor and descended the stairs. As they neared the bottom, the same booming crack shook the walls, only this time it came from the rear of the house. Ariya and Zarin rushed in its direction and found themselves in the empty kitchen where a back door was left ajar. Upon exiting, they saw a garden area with a perimeter of wooden fencing 6 feet tall and an individual standing in the centre. Their face and head were covered by a bandana and hooded cloak, but their figure appeared feminine. In the woman's left hand was a dark-coloured tome, while the right hand pointed a wand towards where a gate once stood, but was now blown apart into wood chips. Behind the remaining fencing, Valeria's voice was heard shouting, "You've just used lethal spellcraft on a sentinel! By the laws of the Hegemony, we are authorized to respond with force to defend ourselves." The mysterious assailant replied with another shockwave of invisible force that pulsed from her palm and exploded more of the fencing where Valeria took cover. "Sentinel!" Ariya cried out, and the attacker spun around. Black, hair-like strands snaked from the masked woman's book and up her arm and sleeve. It emerged into the other arm and coursed its way under her skin until reaching the wand and shooting out like needles. Instead of being aimed at Ariya or Zarin, the projectiles punched the ground directly beneath them and caused inky blackness to suddenly spread and choke the life out of any flora. A field of tall obsidian spikes immediately pierced from below, and Ariya felt multiple points of impact smashing into her like repeated blows from a club. Her vision darkened and blurred with sudden dizziness, and she had trouble controlling any of her muscles as she fought to understand what had happened. When she strained to look down, she noticed her torso, left leg, and left arm were impaled by these spikes. A sensation of freezing numbness exploded from the points of impact, and somehow, Ariya knew it was her flesh decaying. When the feeling coursed to her head and darkness overtook her vision, the spikes retreated back into the ground and dragged her life with them.